It was the kind of hospital where silence seemed thicker than the air, where the scent of disinfectant clung to every corner, and the fluorescent lights hummed softly like a lullaby meant to keep the sick asleep. Yet there was one room on the third floor that never had a patient, not for years. The staff walked past it quickly, averting their eyes as if the door itself carried something foul. Room 309 had a reputation. One whispered about only in hushed tones during late night shifts when the halls were otherwise empty. They said patients who entered that room never left the same way. Nurses refused to clean it. Doctors avoided assigning it, and for years it remained locked, a forgotten space in a building where every bed should have mattered. Amira, a trainee nurse just a few months into her residency, didn't understand the superstition. She came from a small town where ghost stories were little more than warnings told to children to keep them indoors after dark. She believed in medicine, in science, in facts. So, when the head nurse warned her during orientation not to linger near 309, she laughed softly under her breath. What's the harm in an empty room? She thought. To her, it seemed like a space wasted in a hospital that was always overcrowded. Beds lined the corridors during flu season, yet this one room stayed untouched, sealed like a tomb. One night, during a particularly hectic shift, Amira was tasked with fetching extra supplies from the storage closet near 309. She wheeled her cart down the hallway, the wheels squeaking faintly against the tiles, the fluorescent lights flickering above her head. She felt the temperature drop as she neared the closed door. A strange draft seemed to seep out from the cracks, even though the air vents nearby were shut tight. She stopped for a moment, gripping the handle of the cart, and looked at the brass numbers screwed into the door 309. The metal looked older than the rest of the floor, worn down by years of neglect. She told herself she wasn't afraid, yet her fingers trembled slightly. As she opened the storage closet across the hall, she thought she heard something. A faint shuffle, as though someone inside the empty room was dragging their feet across the floor. She froze, listening. It came again slow and deliberate, like the sound of slippers on linoleum. Her heart raced, but she forced herself to look back. The door was locked, the small viewing window fogged with grime. She leaned closer, holding her breath, but all she could see was the faint outline of shadows moving inside. She blinked, and when she looked again, the window was dark and empty. She closed the closet quickly and rushed back to the ward, telling herself the stress of the shift was making her imagine things. That night, she couldn't sleep. In her mind, she replayed the moment by the door, the shuffling sound, the fleeting shadow. She told herself it was just exhaustion, but part of her wondered why everyone else treated the room like it was alive. Days turned into weeks, and Amira kept noticing little things whenever she passed 309. Once, she heard a soft knock from the inside, 3 slow taps. Another time, she swore she heard a voice whisper her name, so faint she almost convinced herself it was her imagination. But the one thing she couldn't ignore was how the hallway always felt colder near that door, as if it held a winter no one could escape. Amira wasn't superstitious, but curiosity had always been her downfall, and now 309 was becoming an obsession. She started asking around, pressing the older nurses for answers. Some told her to drop it if she valued her job. Others looked away, pretending they hadn't heard the question. Only one elderly janitor, whose hands shook as he mopped the floors at night, gave her a fragment of a story. He leaned in close, his breath smelling faintly of tobacco, and whispered, "Someone died in there." Not just died, they stayed. His eyes darted nervously toward the door, then he crossed himself and shuffled away. That was the moment Amira realized she wouldn't be able to leave it alone. The next few nights Amira found herself glancing at the door more often than she wanted to admit. The shadows behind the window still flickered in her memory, and every time she passed 309, her chest tightened. Finally, she decided she needed answers, not whispers. On her break, she cornered the janitor again, begging him to explain what he meant. His hands shook as he wrung his mop, and he refused at first. But when Amira pressed harder, promising she would tell no one, his face went pale. "They brought in a man years ago," he whispered, eyes darting around as if the walls themselves could hear him. "No family, no name. His body was broken from a car crash. But it wasn't his injuries that made him strange. He talked to things that weren't there. He screamed at corners, cried for shadows to leave him alone. The doctors said he was hallucinating, but people started hearing him at night. Not just screaming, talking, laughing. His lips trembled. One night the nurses found him standing in the middle of the room. His body was still, but his eyes, they were looking at something else. And then he died, just like that. Since then, the room has never been the same. Whoever goes and hears him. Some say they see him. Some say they don't come out at all. Amira's skin prickled, but she refused to believe it. Stories grew wild with retelling, she told herself. Yet the image of a man staring into nothingness made her shiver. She tried to push it away, but the room was like a magnet. A week later, during a storm, the hospital lights flickered and power went out for a moment. Emergency generators kicked in, but the corridor outside 309 was plunged into deeper shadow than anywhere else. Amira was on duty that night. While checking the IV drips of her patients, she heard it. 3 slow knocks, unmistakable, from across the hall. She froze, her patients breathing steady in the bed beside her. Again, knock, knock, I knock. Her body screamed at her to ignore it, but her feet moved on their own. She stepped into the hallway, lightning flashing outside the windows, casting eerie shadows. When she reached the door, the small window was clear for the first time. She could see inside. The bed was neatly made, but she wasn't alone. A man stood with his back to her, shoulders hunched, facing the far wall. His hospital gown hung loosely, and his head tilted unnaturally. Amira's breath caught in her throat. She blinked, and the figure was gone. The bed was empty again. Her heart raced. She stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the supply cart. She told herself it was a trick of the lightning, a reflection, anything but what she saw. But when she turned to leave, the door handle rattled violently, as if someone inside was desperate to come out. She ran then, not stopping until she reached the safety of the nurses' station. For the rest of the night, she avoided the 3rd floor, asking a colleague to cover her rounds there. But sleep wouldn't come when her shift ended. She kept seeing that hunched figure, kept hearing the knocks in the silence of her apartment. The room was in her head now, and the more she tried to shake it, the more it clung to her. The next evening, she returned to work determined to confront it. If she could prove to herself it wasn't real, maybe the obsession would stop. She tucked a spare key into her pocket. The key she had quietly lifted from the head nurse's desk, while no one was watching. Her hands shook as she fingered it inside her scrubs. That night, when the ward quieted and the hallways dimmed, she found herself standing before 309, the key heavy in her hand. She slid it into the lock. The click echoed like thunder in the silent corridor. The air inside was colder than she imagined, like stepping into a freezer. The smell of antiseptic was faint, replaced by something damp and metallic, almost like rust or blood. She hesitated, holding the door open with her foot, her flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The bed stood neatly made, white sheets untouched, yet a faint impression dented the mattress, as though someone had been lying there just moments before. Her pulse thundered in her ears as she stepped further inside, the door clicking shut behind her. Instantly, the room seemed to exhale, the walls pressing in, the shadows thickening. Amira told herself to breathe, to stay calm. She swept the flashlight across the walls. That's when she saw the scratches. Deep grooves etched into the plaster, long claw, like marks running down from ceiling to floor, as though someone had tried to claw their way out. She stumbled back, her breath quickening. No one ever mentioned this. The light flickered. The bulb in the ceiling buzzed to life for a split second, then went out again. In that flash she saw him, the man the janitor had described. Standing by the far corner, face half, hidden in shadow, eyes gleaming unnaturally bright, his mouth opened in a soundless scream, head jerking at an impossible angle. Then darkness swallowed him. Amira gasped, dropping her flashlight. The room plunged into black. She bent quickly, fumbling for it, her hands shaking. The silence around her was heavy, suffocating. Then came the sound, a soft shuffle, closer and closer. She snatched the flashlight and snapped it on. The beam landed on the bed. Someone was sitting on it now, hunched, rocking slightly back and forth. She couldn't see his face, but his lips moved as if whispering to himself. Her courage broke. She turned and yanked the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. Panic surged as she rattled it, pulling harder and harder. Behind her, the whispering grew louder, words twisting into broken laughter. A chill breath brushed the back of her neck. She screamed and slammed her shoulder into the door. With a violent creak, it burst open, and she tumbled into the hallway. The corridor was empty, silent, as if nothing had happened. Her flashlight beam darted around wildly, but the shadows remained still. She slammed the door shut, locking it quickly. Her chest heaved, tears welling in her eyes. She swore never to step foot in there again. But the room wasn't done with her. That night at home, she woke to the sound of slow knocking, 3 taps, coming from her bedroom closet. Trembling, she reached for the light, but it refused to turn on. She sat frozen, listening as the closet door rattled softly, the same way room 309's door had. She knew then, whatever lingered in that room had followed her home. Sleep became impossible. Amira stopped eating, her body weakening as the nights stretched on. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him, the patient who died in 309, standing at the foot of her bed, eyes glowing, head twitching, lips moving silently. The knocks echoed through her apartment, sometimes from the walls, sometimes from under her bed. Her coworkers noticed her pale face, her trembling hands, but she couldn't tell them the truth. They would call her delusional, the same way they had labeled him. One night, unable to take it anymore, she returned to the hospital long after her shift ended. The corridors were empty, the building eerily quiet. She carried the stolen key in her fist, her nails digging into her palm. Her plan was desperate: confront the spirit, demand it leave her alone, end it once and for all. As she approached the 3rd floor, she heard it already, whispering behind the door, low and urgent, as if waiting for her. Her hand shook as she turned the key. The door creaked open, and the room welcomed her with its icy breath. This time, the bed wasn't made. Sheets were torn, hanging loosely, and the whispers were louder, surrounding her. The patient appeared again, standing inches from her, face clearer now. His eyes were black voids, his smile stretched unnaturally wide. "You let me out," he rasped, though his lips barely moved. "No, you're mine." The door slammed shut behind her. She screamed and ran to it, but it wouldn't open. The whispers grew into a cacophony, hundreds of voices layered together, some begging, some laughing. The walls began to pulse, bleeding dark stains that dripped to the floor. She turned, pressing herself against the door, and saw the figure lunging toward her. His hands, thin and skeletal, reached for her throat. The next morning, the nurses found room 309 locked as usual. But when they unlocked it to check, the bed was occupied for the first time in years. Amira lay there, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, her lips moving in silent whispers. Her pulse was gone. Her skin was cold. Yet her lips never stopped forming words no one could understand. The hospital sealed the door again that same day. Room 309 remained unused, its reputation darker than before. But sometimes, late at night, the nurses swore they heard her voice in the hallway, calling their names softly, begging them to come closer. And though the staff avoided the door more than ever, the whispers never stopped. Because once you opened that room, it never let you go.